Hello and welcome to Attacking Third. We are live on YouTube and we are coming at you with our NWSL previews. We're going to go team by team. We're going to hook you up with an Angel City preview, a Chicago Red Stars preview. So make sure to subscribe to us, like this video, and drop all your thoughts in the chat about these two teams. Hey everyone, welcome to Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. Get ready to chat about all things Angel City because we've got an NWSL preview for them coming right up. So make sure you leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. We're also on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe to us at youtube.com/Attacking Third. Get all sorts of exclusive NWSL content, previews, recaps, interviews, and more with A3. The NWSL season starts March 25th. It's right around the corner, so you can watch all the games on Paramount Plus, and we are doing every single team preview, a podcast, and on YouTube. So make sure you tell your friends. Lisa, we're doing it all over again. We did it last season. We said, let's do 12 team-by-team previews. Let's talk about it all. And we're doing this all in the build-up to kick off of the regular season on March 25th. We're just under a month away.
Just under a month. I mean, February is kind of weird, right? They're like missing a couple days at the end of it. But yes, about a month until the regular season starts. So what better time to do this? What better time to also relaunch a little bit of how we look? We've got some new branding, some new graphics, a new logo for Attacking Third. Our graphics team at CBS has worked really hard. Shout out Kim and Mike Meredith and Tim. These guys did a great job redesigning it. So if you're just listening as a podcast, you can look at the new graphic art on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, wherever you're listening. And if you're on YouTube, let us know what you think. Drop us a grade in the chat, right? An A+ if you like it, a B. I want to know what people think because we really like it.
We too have to be graded sometimes. That's true.
You have to be graded. So drop us a grade in the chat. We want to know what you think of it. It was a lot of fun for us to kind of redesign this and go forward with it. And what better time to do it than when we're starting the 2023 team-by-team previews. We've got a new look going. It's a Monday morning, so we're back to a Monday morning live show that we'll be doing. We do that throughout the season as recapping the weekend. So we're sticking back to that schedule now that we're kind of weaning out of the off season. It is good to be here. It's good to be back. I had a very eventful weekend, which was fun. I still don't have a car actually, which is horrifying.
Wow.
Hopefully picking that up today, but I got to go snowboarding, which is really fun. I'm definitely not sitting on a packet of ice right now because I'm sore, but it was good. It was good. How about you, Sandra? How was your weekend?
I'm with you. I tried to have a little bit of R&R. But, I was just so excited to get back to Monday and chat about all things NWSL. It's like when you see that, when you're crossing off the days on the calendar and you know what's in front of you, we're getting amped about this too. It's not just players and coaches who sort of get up for this kind of stuff. We're excited for the regular season to start as well. And I knew that we were going to unveil this new look, sort of this rebranding for us. And I love it. Yeah. Shout outs to the entire team who made this happen. It was a lovely collaborative effort where they, wanted to make sure that they got our feedback in terms of the look. And it's really cool to see this all come to life with, all the X's and O's and everything. We love it. So we appreciate you all, giving us the feedback as well. It looks like it's a positive reaction so far. Yes, beautiful. A+. Love an A+.
Paul Brown giving us an A3.
That's right, Paul.
Hilarious. I love that.
Giving Attacking Third an A3. I like it. I'll take the minus. I will. I love it. People confused thinking they're on the wrong channel. I love that. This is roll with us. We've been talking about how we were sort of teasing this a little bit in our later episodes in last week. So we knew what was coming, and thanks to everyone who was making their predictions as to what we were going to announce and unveil today. So this is kind of funny to sort of see, kind of come full circle with those things. Someone threw out like a pregnancy rumor. That was funny. Lisa and I had a good time with that for sure. But listen, new year, new look, but we're still chatting all things NWSL. So let's hop right into it. We're doing these in somewhat alphabetical order, I guess. We're starting with Angel City right at the top. Angel City's got to love the beginning of a regular season, because they're gonna start out every year on top until another team might come in and roll out with an A name. But letter A, they're on top right now. All zeros for all the teams looking ahead into 2023 regular season. No wins, no losses, no draws, none of that. But let's start with an overview of the team here for folks who maybe aren't too familiar themselves with Angel City. Head coach Freya Coombe, this is officially her second year with the franchise. She previously was with Gotham FC, formerly Sky Blue, now since 2019. And they finished their 2022 season, their inaugural season, in 8th place in the regular season standings. And so we were looking at this team to really kind of tackle this offseason and really kind of steal some headlines. And when we were doing a little bit of our off-season grading on the show, we ended up giving them a C plus. When I wrote up my grades for .com, I gave them a C plus. And I asked you, Lisa, I was just like, hey, like, what do you think of Angel City? Like, do you have room for, bumping them higher or lower? And you sort of felt like this was a reasonable grade to give them in their offseason.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a little bit reasonable because this is an Angel City team that came in last year in 2022 in their inaugural season, and they made a lot of noise with their people that were investing in them, their investors and ownerships of the team, what they were doing in LA with the community, with their signings in Kristen Press that they got some really big names. They made trades for Sydney Leroux last year. And in the offseason, they really didn't do too much. I mean, they made a lot of trades and a lot of money for a number 1 draft pick in the 2023 NWSL draft. And they end up going with Alyssa Thompson, the young 17-year-old out of high school, out of California, to keep her there. And I think that was really the biggest thing they did in the offseason, besides maybe a little bit of like for like trade in a Tyler Lucy, Merritt Mathias, and we'll talk about it, but really not too much. I mean, when you looked at 2022, Freya Coombe as a head coach, she didn't really rotate players a lot on her squad. She didn't. It was 15 players that saw minutes and saw time, and that was kind of it. Otherwise, if you were off that bubble of getting time to play, you weren't really going to get into that starting lineup and get significant minutes. The players that were playing 80, 90 minutes every single game. So the depth of this Angel City roster, I was maybe expecting to see it grow a little bit more in the offseason, just with the nature of injuries that have happened. I mean, they suffered a lot of injuries last year, the World Cup being this year. I was expecting a little bit more. So I give C plus for sure for this Angel City team in the offseason. But they did change their roster a little bit, right? Some changes happening on their roster list.
Oh, no, for sure. I think sort of looking at their offseason as a whole, kind of issuing those grades, it included things like how they fared in the free agency period. It included how they tackled the draft, how they tackled any sort of player departures, whether that was through trades or otherwise. But I think in terms of the free agency period, I wouldn't exactly consider them winners. I think we're looking at an Angel City side that has often, been out there talking about their franchise, how they want to be the first ever women's professional soccer franchise with $1 billion valuation, and going out there and sort of, priding themselves on these things and showing the worth and value and the importance of investing within, women's pro sports.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came to their free agency period, they didn't have a ton of those free agency signings. There were a lot of what we considered really top tier talent amongst that list of free agents. And when it came to signing out of free agency, they ended up going with Katie Johnson out of free agency, formerly with San Diego Wave, a California native, went to USC. So there's a lot of ties there, Mexican-American player. So they're very excited to have this player a veteran player of the league at this point, has played with multiple teams, and they have her currently listed as sort of a midfielder, but slash forward option. So it's going to be interesting to see where Freya Coombe might actually utilize Katie Johnson in this starting 11. But they also acquired Merritt Mathias out of North Carolina Courage.
Yeah, I think a big get for them defensively, because within that trade, there's Tyler Lucy, who is a forward and a defender for Freya Coombe, but really played in the outside back role as a forward converted to a defender. That Lucy got sent to North Carolina. So pretty much a like for like trade there in Angel City, gaining a player in Merritt Mathias, a veteran of this league, can play in the outside back, really skilled 1v1 defender, and can also contribute in the attacking end of the field, getting crosses into the box and overloading sides to create man-up opportunities down the flank. I think those are big signings, and what happened between Alyssa Thompson, Katie Johnson, and Merritt Mathias, nothing too crazy, right? I think the biggest one making the waves there is a player like Alyssa Thompson, but also we haven't seen her yet. So how is she going to adjust to the speed of the game and the play? I mean, she already has I believe it's 2 caps with the United States women's national team as the senior team. So this is a young player that can hopefully come in and really make a difference for Angel City. And although this isn't a roster signing or a trade or someone being drafted to this team, Angel City is also hoping to get back a couple players that were injured last year. And I think Sarah Gordon, defender, who played years with Chicago and was chosen in the expansion draft to go to Angel City on her injury. She hasn't played a single minute yet with Angel City. And that's someone in Sarah Gordon that I am expecting to make a big return for this Angel City side, and with Freya Coombe to make this year a little different from what was last year for this Angel City side.
No, I'm with you. And listen, let's also just provide a little bit more clarity for folks in terms of really how Sarah Gordon is rated by other teams.
Sarah
Gordon is a player that Chicago essentially engaged in a trade with Angel City for expansion roster protection.
Yes.
So this is a player that was part of a negotiation process in Chicago's offseason now two seasons ago, where they knew that there was going to be a double expansion with 2 California sides coming into the team, and they wanted to try to do something to ensure that they would protect their roster. There was also a ton of players who had requested trades to exit from Chicago's franchise just due to a lot of the negative headlines that were around the team at the time. So this was one of those players. So you're talking about a hometown local player to Chicago who's really sort of elevated her game and developed over the course of her experience within NWSL specifically, has never left this league to play outside internationally, and eventually raised her profile enough and became a really good center back in this league, to the point where Angel City was like, yes, this is a player that we will talk to you and negotiate with you about to help build up around our roster. And so there was a lot of excitement, I think, in getting this caliber of player to Angel City. But then she picked up, the ACL injury over the course of a preseason with them just before their inaugural season. So I'm almost with you on where I think there's going to be a lot of people who get reminded about Sarah Gordon.
I think people forgot, honestly, especially because the way Angel City came into the league as an expansion team and with a lot of bells and whistles, I'm going to be honest. And Sarah Gordon is a huge bell, a giant whistle. And because people didn't see her last year in a year that had a lot of change, especially for Angel City, I think some people forgot about her. And man, are they going to be shocked when they see her take the pitch, because Sarah Gordon is an amazing defender. I mean, she was an Iron Woman for Chicago. She's an athlete through and through. She's impressive to watch. So I want to add her to the list for Angel City as someone that they're kind of bulking up their roster, even though she's already been there.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we're talking about a team that needs to bulk up their roster in certain areas, I mean, you also have to sort of look at what that means in terms of who they lost. So we're talking a little bit about maybe the defensive shape in the back line for this team when we're talking about Sarah Gordon. But they also lost a couple players in trades. Tyler Lucy to North Carolina Courage, Akari Riccaro to Chicago. And these were players that kind of became reliable, essential players for Coombe in their inaugural season. Akari Riccaro, someone who has been in this league for quite some time, has played with multiple teams at this point in her career, but entered the league as a high defending prospect, center back out of Notre Dame, and has sort of moved her way up further up the pitch, depending on which team she has been a part of. And Tyler Lucy, an attacking option that they engaged in a trade with Portland Thorns. Again, they were making all these deals with teams ahead of the expansion draft. And then we see Tyler Lucy get kind of converted into sort of a wingback for Angel City, but no longer going to be with Los Angeles, now going to enter 2023 with new clubs. Are these going to be huge shoes to fill, or do you think sort of how the roster is at this point, they'll have players who'll be able to slot in pretty soon?
I think for the Tyler Lucy loss, it's a like for like trade in Merritt Mathias. You're going to get maybe even a little bit better out of that, just because Mathias is a true defender and a wing back in that position. I think losing a player like Carrie Riccaro in the midfield for Angel City is going to be a big loss. I mean, as I mentioned, Angel City didn't really rotate their midfield a lot. It was the same players that were in there consistently week in and week out in their 4-3-3 formation. And Carrie Riccaro, one of those players. She didn't score any goals in the league up until last year, and then she had 4 goals for Angel City. Just a big contributor on the pitch. I think a big personality as well in terms of leadership and what she brings in that sense. But I know we'll get to Chicago very shortly to talk about that team in their preview, but the trade for Carrie Riccaro to go to Chicago in exchange for a little bit of money, or allocation money, was much better for Chicago than it was for Angel City to lose this type of player. I think Angel City might struggle a bit in the midfield this year.
I don't think that's an unfair statement to say. And I chuckle only because I think we were talking about this team last year during their inaugural seasons, and we had talked about that middle third needing a little bit of a boost, needing a little bit of help. And now as they're approaching their regular season, we're talking about one of their midfielders who performed better for them is no longer part of the team. But we'll take a deeper look into some of the personnel that are a part of this team as the regular season approaches. We're going to be back right after a quick break with a rundown of the roster for Angel City. Stick with us.
Let's go. You can feel the madness.
Okay, let's keep talking about Angel City. We got to break down the roster a bit here and go ahead and talk about the personnel that's available for this team in the build-up to the regular season. We talked a little bit about the off-season grade that we gave Angel City, and we stuck with a C+. And part of it maybe was taking a look at how they also navigated the draft. And while they made headlines selecting Alyssa Thompson, a young top prospect, we also were like, they have some needs perhaps at the goalkeeping position, and we saw them go ahead and target that area as well. So in terms of their defenders and goalkeepers, let's start with that right now, because everybody knows at this point that here on A3, we love to talk about defense and defenders. So with goalkeepers, we see Angelina Anderson out of the draft, Didi Herrera and Brittany Eisenhower for the 3 goalkeepers on this roster. Defenders, they've got a couple non-roster invitees. That includes Kelsey Hill and Rachel Diodati. Vanessa Giles is on loan. We'll talk about that a little bit. I think folks still have some question marks around what that's going to mean. for Angel City, but Sarah Gordon, we chatted a bit about, Madison Hammond, Mary Mathias, obviously Paige Nielsen is returning, Megan Reed's returning, Ellie Riley, Allison Schwebe is also another player on loan. Giselle Thompson, sister of Alyssa Thompson, has participated with Angel City as a U18 trialist. And Mavi Nola as well, rounding out the defenders here. When we're looking between the goalkeepers and defenders, whether it's players who are listed as non-roster invitees, a couple of the players who are listed on loan, what stands out for you here in this sort of core of defensive players?
I mean, I think it's really crucial that Didi Hadachich is back with Angel City. Very consistent between the sticks for the LA team last year. And across their back line, although losing Tyler Lucy, they've still got a Paige Nielsen, a Megan Reed, and Allie Riley, players that were namestays in that back line. And I think we'll see Merritt Mathias slot in pretty directly into that list. I mean, Sarah Gordon too, like I think there poses some questions there because you look at players like Paige Nielsen and Megan Reed. Megan Reed, a player that I just loved watching her evolution last year because this player came pretty much out of the woodwork, right? She wasn't playing soccer anymore. And she came to this team. She tried out last year for Angel City and she became a starter playing significant minutes for Angel City in 2022. And she was really fun to watch. So I think that it's really good that they're returning a lot of their consistent defenders for this Angel City side. That's only going to help them grow throughout this year. But there are a lot of defenders listed, 12 right now. And I think that's a lot. I think that's a lot for a position that you just don't rotate as frequently on any team, let alone on this team. But I think some of the other players, right, like as we kind of build up this roster, when you look at the midfield group for Angel City, Taylor Almer, who is a non-roster invite, that's a name that a lot of people would know from Washington Spirit. This is a player that's looking to get on this Angel City team. Katie Johnson, Clarice Lebeon, Savannah McCaskill, Molly McLaughlin, Lily Nabet, Mackenzie Pluck, Domi Richardson, and Danny Weatherholt. I think a lot of familiar names in that list as well. And then forward group, Simone Charlie, who was a big part of this team last year, coming in off the bench, Claire Emsley, June Endo, Sydney LaRue, Mia Ministrea, Kristen Press, Jasmine Spencer, and Alyssa Thompson. Any names specifically stand out to you? Who do you think will be big impact players there?
You know, we were lucky to go to Angel City twice on tour with Attacking Third. And I feel like each time when we exited those two matches, we were talking about June Endo. This was a player I think that they signed over the offseason of their inaugural season. And I think folks who maybe are the more casual fan don't look outside internationally. We're a little curious as to how this player was going to contribute to Angel City. And I think she has just really elevated her sort of importance to the team in terms of even just in her versatility, because another thing that we witnessed in the couple times that we were out there was how June Endo can sort of play across different positions and different lines on the pitch. And I'm not too sure if that's the energy they're going to roll with around this player going into 2022. They've got her listed specifically as a forward, but I think Jasmine Spencer on this preseason roster specifically being listed as a forward as well is something that out a little bit to me. This was, again, another one of these players that we saw utilized that has a lot of great attacking skill sets, but Freya Coombe, similar to Tyler Lucy, wanted to keep these players lower in the pitch and kind of operate in those kind of outside back, wing back positions. So I'm a little curious if maybe there have been different conversations with a player like Spencer in the lead up to this regular season and how they want to utilize her moving forward. But I think listing Katie Johnson, someone who has typically been a forward on rosters in this league, is specifically listed as a midfielder for Angel City. Look, this was one of the areas that they knew they needed to get help in, and perhaps they wanted to try to utilize the free agency period to do that. But I don't know if they actually were able to check that box off with so many of the top midfield prospects, whether it was somebody like a Dabinia or
exactly
or even a Desiree Scott at this point, or a Vanessa Di Bernardo or a Danny Colaprico, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't get any of those players. So to sort of sign off with Katie Johnson and obviously say, hey, you're going to be listed here. We're going to have to see how that works out. Now, I think maybe there could be a little bit of an advantage there. McCaskill and Johnson did play together while in Chicago. So there's not going to be a learning curve there. These are two players who have experience playing together, who are probably familiar with each other's movements on the pitch. And maybe this is perhaps a roll of the dice and a gamble to hope that these two can reconnect and create some good things in the middle third. And I'm hopeful with it too, because I'm a big fan of Katie Johnson and her play for teams across the league. So I'm hopeful that this will work out for Angel City. I'd like to see it, but it all depends on what Freya has in her notebook and how she wants things to roll out for them.
And honestly, who knows how that could go? Because as you mentioned, Jasmine Spencer, it doesn't really matter how much that they're listed on the roster, right? Like these are not boxes that players are put into. It's really, they can be anywhere. And we've seen that, because I imagine we will see Jasmine Spencer as an outside back at some point this year for Freya Coombe. I just do, but you're not going to change a player entirely. And with getting a Katie Johnson, Slaughter in the midfield, I bet we'll see her up top, especially if there's still injuries. We don't know the status of a player like Sydney LaRue at this point. Kristen Press, another one working back from injury, kind of where their status is heading into this year is a bit unknown. But there are some important pieces on this roster, whether they're young or whether they're old, that are going to be big game changers and difference makers for Angel City.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think when we're looking in terms of their ideal starting 11, you have to look at who's going to be that experienced veteran that this team is going to rely on, who's going to be that young prospect that they're going to look for to come out there and make an impact immediately. I think we both agree that they made a series of moves to go out and get this player, and we're looking at Alyssa Thompson and what she's going to bring to this team in her rookie season. And I'm giving them a little bit of grace in this because, we had Alyssa Thompson on the show and we chatted with her a little bit about this kind of whirlwind experience that she had that has led her to this moment to go pro, to be the youngest player to get selected, in the draft, coming out as a high school senior, going pro in NWSL. But she talked about one of the leading factors in making that decision was having multiple conversations with not just her family, but her team and other teams, plural, about what her pro season could potentially look like if she does make that leap while still navigating her senior year. And she said that education was very important to her, that she wanted to still navigate these two roads, both as a high school senior and as a professional, while still being able to have those experiences, have the experiences of a senior year, go through finishing school, have graduation, have, earning your diploma, going to prom.
Going to prom.
all of that stuff is very important. Big milestones for any high school senior. So I would anticipate that, yes, there's a lot to be excited about around Alyssa Thompson, but I also imagine and anticipate that this is a player that they're going to work in pretty slowly, at least in this first half of the regular season. We might not see regular starts from somebody like a Thompson until perhaps post World Cup even. So I think because of that, maybe we're looking to the experienced players and who's going to step up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point about when we might see an Alyssa Thompson. And this year in the NWSL, it's a little bit different because Challenge Cup is not a preseason tournament anymore. Yeah. And that, as many negatives as there were some positives in how you could try out new things against real competition in the NWSL that mattered to something. But now that that's not really the case, I think it's a little bit different that you kind of have to look at for someone like Alyssa Thompson. You don't want to throw her into the fire too quickly. You want to make sure she's adjusted and getting there correctly, right, in terms of being able to do everything she can. I think for experienced veterans on this roster, there's a number of them we could have chosen. But for me, the biggest one that stands out is midfielder Danny Weatherholt. This is a player that defensively in the midfield was one of the most consistent players in 2022. She was always in the midfield. She was always the quiet, stable leader for this side and in Freya Kum's side. She started every single game that she played. It was a player that played on both sides of the ball, right? Mostly she was a defensive midfielder in Danny Weatherholt, but now with a lot of the changes that are happening around her, whether they're getting someone like a Sarah Gordon in the back line or they're adding another Katie Johnson to the midfield along with the Savannah McCaskill, I think the stability of the ship for Angel City is going to have to come from someone like a Danny Weatherholt, because she can also play those split passes and break lines with her incredible vision on top of the ball. And maybe even it becomes a combo, right? Someone like a Danny Weatherholt is going to have to take someone like an Alyssa Thompson under her wing, show her the ropes of being a professional and how important this game is and playing in front of really big stands in Los Angeles. So I'm excited to see what Weatherholt can do this year. I think the team's going to lean on her a lot.
I'm with you. I'm in agreement with you 100%. I loved when we're out in Angel City and we saw all of the signs specifically for Danny Weatherholt. I loved it. I'm with you. I would anticipate that this is the experienced player that they're going to try to rely upon a little bit. And that's not to say that they don't have a ton of veteran players that they can pull from and try to, get a lot of great stuff, whether it's on, off the pitch or in the locker room. But a lot of those other experienced players are making their return from pretty significant injuries. We're talking previously about Sarah Gordon. This is someone that they're going to have to, kind of work back into regular playing time, someone who has been off of the pitch already for about a year. That's a long time to get reacclimated. Kristen Press, someone who's also navigating, her ACL rehab. Sydney LaRue is a player that they signed midseason, and she's also coming back from injury as well. So Danny Weatherholt, I think, is a good player to sort of kind of keep the spotlight on for a little bit, as someone that they're going to lean on a little bit. In terms of spotlight, we've got international spotlights that we're going to have to take a look at because this is a World Cup year. So there will be multiple players likely for Angel City who will be gone for the World Cup. We chatted a little bit about June Endo, likely to miss some time representing Japan in the 2023 World Cup. We also talked about Vanessa Giles, but also Ali Riley as part of New Zealand, the co-host nation. So while Giles is with Canada, we've got Riley with New Zealand. So these, again, we're talking about players who they want to pull from for their experience. Ali Riley is one of those players, a veteran experienced player that Angel City has really looked to sort of, make sure that they are cool, calm, and collected on the pitch, has captained this team, is, a local to California as well, has gone on record multiple times talking about what it means to her personally to play on a team like Angel City as a local California kid. But these are players that are going to be absent from the roster this year. And maybe we highlight Gilles for a little bit, because this is a player that's going to be gone for an extended period of time, not just for the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to look at some of these individuals. I think June Endo is one with Japan, obviously, and Ali Riley, big missing pieces for this Angel City team. June Endo especially. This is one that really holds everything together. She's so fun to watch. But Vanessa Gilles, a player with Angel City that's actually currently on loan. She is overseas and she'll be playing there until the end of that season. So she won't even be back with Angel City until June. And then pretty immediately, she's got about a month and a half before she's then headed over to the World Cup. So I think a really good move personally for a player like Vanessa Gilles to continue to play throughout this offseason, throughout the winter in Europe and get significant minutes over there, continue to keep her game up. But it's going to be a miss for Angel City not to have Gilles at the start of this season. And yes, it is a World Cup year, but the NWSL regular season takes a little bit of a pause from July 9th through August 18th, the regular season. That's when we'll see the majority of the Challenge Cup being played. And of course, the World Cup happening from July 20th through August 20th. So there's a lot of moving parts in between like June, July, August that we'll have to see what with Vanessa Gilles coming back to Angel City for a couple weeks and then going to play in the World Cup with Canada. It's going to be really interesting to see how the middle of the regular season goes without some of these players. I think June Endo is one of the biggest ones that they'll miss.
Absolutely. I think the only silver lining in all of this that we could talk about is when we go through all these previews, every single team is going to miss impactful players due to the World Cup. So it's not just Angel City, although they are going to miss some pretty significant key players there. Let's wrap this up a little bit for Angel City. Let's talk about the biggest burning question that we have for Angel City in the 2023 NWSL regular season. Quite frankly, it echoes what we presented to them last year in their inaugural season. This is a team that has become really one of the most popular teams, not just in NWSL, but alongside the world. We could see all of the excitement around Angel City, sort of making its rise as this kind of iconic brand, right? And we hear a lot about that. Again, we're talking about a club and its ownership group that talks a lot about high ambitions of being that billion-dollar evaluation type of team, record-breaking scenes at their stadiums, multiple sellouts, shattering records for season ticket holders. It's all of the scenes that you want to see within NWSL and women's pro soccer here in the United States. But can this team match all of the buzz, connect all of the buzz around it onto the pitch and break through to the playoffs? Has this team done enough in their offseason to make sure that 2023 is the year that happens, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest burning question. Is this a playoff contention team right now? I think it going hand in hand is in that. Can they break 500, right? They had 8 wins, 9 losses last year to go along with those 5 draws they had. But can they break 500? That get 8 and 8, right? Along those, get 10 and 10, win more games than you can lose. And I know that sounds so simple, but those are just the little things that this team has to look at coming into this year, whether they're getting players back or they're not, whoever they're losing for the World Cup, whoever they're not losing, the young players they're looking to mold. There's a lot. I think there's a lot of pressure on Angel City, but a lot of pressure they put on themselves to be one of the best teams. And the fact that they fell short of the playoffs last year, I think that hurt. That left a bit of a sour taste in their mouth, especially considering their expansion team counterparts in San Diego ended up hosting a first round playoff game because they finished 3rd overall. So I think that's something. It's a little bit of a monkey on the back for Angel City. Can they make playoffs? Can they finish above 500 in 2023? And you and I, we're gonna predict it because we want to talk about the projected finish for Angel City in 2023. Burning question: can they make the playoffs, Sandra? Do we predict them to finish in playoff position?
I won't be surprised if Angel City mirrors a little bit what happened in 2022. It's impressive that this was a team who remained in playoff conversation. I won't even say contention, but they did remain in playoff conversation in 2022, going into the final couple of weeks of regular season fixtures. But they had some unreal obstacles to get through. We're talking about a double-digit goal differential. They had to defeat, I believe it was Chicago Red Stars by 16 plus goals. It was out of this world. So sure, there was playoff conversation around this team going into the final few weeks of the regular season. However, they still finished in 8th place, well out of contention for the playoffs. And I think this might mirror what we saw last season in terms of where they could finish. I think it could be anywhere as high as 7th. I also think it could be anywhere as low as 10th. I don't know if this is going to be the year that they break through the playoffs.
I don't think so either. I think that they just didn't do enough in the offseason. It seems like a slow roll game for Angel City at this point, and just their second year in the league. I think it's going to be a little bit harder for them, especially considering some of the moves and the changes that other teams around them have made. I think they'll be right outside of playoff contention by the end of 2023. But hey, only time can tell. Only time will tell.
We'll have to keep an eye on it, see if we're right or see if we're wrong. We've got more team previews to roll out for everyone, so stay with us. We're going to chat all about the Chicago Red Stars after a quick break.
March Madness is almost here. Who's in? Who's out? The answers are revealed on the March Madness Selection Show, March 12th on CBS.
Hey, everyone, and welcome into Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's segment, we've got a Chicago Red Stars preview. We're doing team-by-team previews here at Attacking Third, so make sure you leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. We're also on YouTube, so hit subscribe at youtube.com/Attacking Third to get all sorts of exclusive NWSL content, previews, recap, interviews right here with A3. The NWSL regular season kicks off on March 25th, so make sure you watch all the games on Paramount Plus. And that's right, we're doing every single team preview podcast and on YouTube. So go ahead and tell your friends. Let's chat all about Chicago Red Stars. Let's start with a team overview, Lisa. Head coach, Chicago Red Stars head coach, Chris Petrucelli. Second year for Petrucelli with Chicago Red Stars. They hired him out of SMU. Collegiately, there was a lot of question marks around how this team was going to fill this head coaching role after the departure of former head coach Roy Dames. They went ahead with Petrucelli. It sort of felt like when we talked about this hire initially, kind of felt like a little bit of a safe hire. They wanted to make sure that they got somebody in here to go ahead and just roll with the assistant coaching staff that was in place at the time, and go ahead and get this team together and make sure they had a safe and comfortable environment to compete in moving forward. So going into this regular season, they said farewell to some former assistants. Julian Stitch coaching men's D3 with University of Chicago has had a great success with that team, and they went ahead and had to maybe make some more hires to sort of flesh out their technical staff. And probably the biggest and most notable promotions and hires was the announcement of Michelle Lomnicki, no longer the associate or assistant GM, but full general manager of the Chicago Red Stars. And they also announced Ella Massar as assistant coach, was previously with Kansas City Current in 2022. So trying to make some upgrades in certain areas for this team, really just on the front office and technical staff side of things. And that's not including the roster, which we'll get into in a little bit. But this team finished their 2022 in sixth place. They made a return to the playoffs with a 9-6-7 record, fell in the quarterfinals to San Diego Wave FC. And we were looking at this team as maybe one of those teams who needed to make sure that they tried to retain a number of free agency, because Chicago Red Stars were the only team with 7 free agents heading into this offseason. And we knew that it was going to be a challenge for this franchise to try and retain any of them, really, let alone all 7 of them. So kind of taking a look at what they lost in the offseason in terms of the free agency period, taking, into consideration how they navigated their draft. At that point, they really needed to try to utilize the draft to bulk up some of the roster, and taking a look at just general moves. Like, what was Michelle Lomnicki going to bring to Chicago? And she delivered, in my opinion, a couple of important pieces. But all things considered, we ended up giving them a C+ for their off-season grade. Yes, they lost a lot of players to free agency, and maybe you can't hold a team at fault for that, because players are going to exercise their right to free agency as they fought hard for in the collective bargaining agreement. But that also means that you as a franchise can try to dabble in that as well and try to make some signings. And they did re-sign Aaron Wright. They did re-sign Yuki Nagasato. And while they turned 3 selections into a 4-player selection for the draft, they essentially still just have 3 players on this roster, because Grace Yoakum has declined to go pro due to an ongoing undisclosed illness, so will not be making the leap to pro. So taking all these things in consideration, we gave them a C+. I'm still comfortable with that grade. I think you're still comfortable with that grade. But was there anything within this offseason that really kind of jumps out for you that maybe symbolizes that the Red Stars will be competitive and be okay in this regular season?
No. I'm going to be really honest with that. No, I think they suffered a lot of loss. Chicago suffered a lot of loss. We saw it's almost back-to-back years for this team dealing with a lot of changes, whether it's in the front office or on their roster. And to lose 7 free agents means you're not just losing 7 players on your roster, you're losing 7 starters, 7 veterans, 7 players that have also been with Chicago for a significant amount of time. And in some of those names, a lot of people, a lot of players, when they got to Chicago, they usually started there and they stayed there. And to kind of see a little bit of a mass exodus from Chicago, I think says a lot about kind of how that club was for many years. And now that they are trying to change things and turn things around, I think it's great that Yuki Nagasato has re-signed with this Chicago Red Stars team after being traded back last year from Racing Louisville to Chicago, and also Erin Wright solidifying herself in the defensive end. That's a really good get for Chicago. I mean, in terms of like the club, no, I think they deserve a C+. I don't think they did anything too crazy in the offseason, but individually, they've got some great players that have worked their tails off. I mean, look at someone like a Tierna Davidson coming back from injury. She was just called in with the U.S. women's national team. I think she had a great offseason personally. I think Mallory Swanson had a great offseason, formerly Pugh. Mallory Pugh of the Red Stars and the U.S. women's national team. Swanson had a fantastic offseason. So individually, yeah, they want to win and they want to do great. But as a club, I'm just not so entirely sure how it's going to come together, because I give them this C+. And when we look at the roster for Chicago, they got some good players, I think, that will bulk some things up for them. But overall, it wasn't anything too crazy, right? With the trade with Angel City, getting someone like a Carrie Riccaro in the midfield, that was needed. That was necessary for this roster for the Red Stars, because they lost a lot in their midfield, a lot of attacking power and presence. And Riccaro is a player that can defensively lock things down, but also contribute in the offensive end, score some goals. I think I'd really like to see the partnership between a Carrie Riccaro and a Mallory Swanson, how that develops. I think that could be very fun to see.
Oh no, I'm with you 100%. I think when we're looking at some of those off-season moves for the team, they came in later stages of the offseason for Chicago. There was a window of time there. I mean, we're talking about free agency kicking off, like really taking off in mid-November, and Chicago making some of these moves kind of around the draft and post-draft as well. So we're talking just a couple of weeks before preseason really gets rolling for some of these teams. Carrie Riccaro, that trade with Angel City for, I believe it was $65,000 in allocation money.
Yep.
I think if Riccaro can sort of mimic what she did for Angel City in 2022, and even just build on that just a little bit. Maybe you add another goal, or maybe you add like 2 more assists. Even that could be the difference maker for this team that has lost so much in its midfield. But announcing the signing of Julia Bianchi. We're talking a lot of excitement around Brazilian players who have representation across so many clubs right now in NWSL, exiting a She Believes Cup with a lot of different players, for people who are getting maybe a first glimpse at some of these players in action with their NWSL side. So I thought that was a very good signing. And Bianchi, I mean, this is a player who was rated with Palmeiras pretty highly. I mean, won defensive midfielder of the year, I believe, multiple years, but coming off of a most recent win in that award as well. So I think there's good things on paper for this Chicago Red Stars team, but there's also a lot of loss for this team as well. And I think that's going to be the difference between this year and last year. There was a similar narrative around the Chicago Red Stars team in their 2022 offseason. They had a mass exodus in 2022. They had a number of players request trades and make their exit from this franchise. And we thought, how are they going to fare? Is this going to be the first year that Chicago Red Stars miss out on the playoffs? And I think the difference in that is while they had a lot of players make an exit in 2022, they still had a lot of veteran pieces on this team, whether it was a Colaprico, a DiBernardo, even someone like an Alyssa Motts at the time who was making her way back from injury, Aaron Wright, Yuki Nagasato, who had made a return from Louisville, Alyssa Nair is included in that equation. But now that's not necessarily the case for this Red Stars team moving forward in 2023. So while they've got good pieces in it, these are still pieces that are going to need time to get acclimated with each other. Kari Riccaro is one of those veteran pieces that maybe this team could sort of pull from and get some of these breakout performances. But this is going to be her first year with this team in Chicago Red Stars. Same for a player like Bianchi. And then we're not even talking about the addition of youth to this team. So we've got a number of players who are going to enter their sophomore season with Chicago. And now you're going to add even more youth in this one as well. So there's a lot to chat about for this team. I think in terms of the what ifs and whether you go by things position by position or line by line, I think maybe that's where you're going to try to find some answers. And we're going to try to do that. We're going to go through all of Chicago's roster for everyone right after a quick break.
Meanwhile, on Paramount Mountain.
Okay, we have the northern face, the southern face, and
the Sylvester Stallone face. Of course.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing?
Is that Dad? Yeah.
No, don't sneeze.
Dear God, no.
Hold it.
Hold it.
Don't do it.
Down!
Ha! Gesundheit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's chat a little bit about how Chicago's roster looks into this preseason. Alyssa Nair, Emily Boyd for the goalkeeping unit right now. Aaron Wright, Casey Kruger, Tierna Davidson, Bianca St. George's, Tatum Milazzo, Kayla Sharples, Amanda Kowalski. Midfielders, Julia Bianchi, Addie McCain, Kari Riccaro, Jill Aguilera, Sam Fisher, Mel Swanson, Jenna Bike, Yuki Nagasato, Ella Stevens, Sarah Griffith, Ava Cook, Chelsea Darber, sort of rounding out what is the first team at this point on their website. This is sort of where we just pulled it from and are running things down. In terms of what we just rattled off and what we could see in a possible starting 11, I think it goes without saying you're looking at someone like an Alyssa Nair, who's going to be your likely starting goalkeeper. You're looking at Mallory Swanson, who's going to probably start as often as she can for this team in a World Cup year. And I think there's some unknown variables, right, when we're looking at this back line. And I think that's where we really have to highlight some question marks. Aaron Wright, I think, was a massive re-signing for this team out of free agency. Not only did it ensure you have a versatile player who really has played anywhere along that back line for this team, but has also played higher for the team at times in the past. But there's question marks around, Casey Kruger, Kayla Sharples, Tierna Davidson. Tierna Davidson and Kayla Sharples are coming off of ACL injuries. They are in what's considered like return to play protocols, but how that looks after not having had any time on the pitch for an extended period of time, we'll see in the early stages of the regular season. Casey Kruger making her return from maternity leave. This is a player that I don't know if people realized was already trying to work her way back with the Chicago Red Stars team at the end of 2022. It's like once they clinched that sixth and final playoff seed, there were some extra looks at Casey Kruger in some of these trainings leading up into that quarterfinal match against the Wave. But how is Casey Kruger going to look, moving forward, as her return from maternity leave? I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of things, I think, that we get a lot of answers to probably within the first 4 weeks of the season. We'll have to really take a look at how the back line lines up, what they look like. Tatum Milazzo has been kind of a rock for this team on the back line for the last 2 seasons. How does she fit in as you're the coaching staff and you're trying to work back players like the Sharples or Davidson or Kruger? What does this team look like? Are we going to still see that fluctuating 5-back because you've got so many of these pieces returning?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest questions. And in 2022 for Chicago, it was their front line was fine. Their midfield was locked down. Like, you knew what you were going to get day in and day out from their midfield. And it was their back line that really were put under pressure from, you look at someone like a Tatum Milazzo, a Zoe Morse, who's no longer on this roster, as players that stepped up and stepped in when they needed to. And they did a great job, right? They go from a 4-back to a 3-back, and you have 2 of the 3 in your 3-back have never played before in the NWSL with Chicago, and they still make the playoffs. Now, this year, it's going to be much different. The back line, I think, has a lot more stability than the midfield, right? You look across that back line, as you mentioned, even a 70% Casey Kruger is better than most defenders in the league. And Erin Wright, to get her returning, she's going to be a mainstay in that back line. A Tierna Davidson coming back from injury, a Tierna Davidson at 60-70% is better than most defenders in the league at this point. And then, yeah, I think you really have to look at someone like a Tatum Milazzo as someone that you put a lot of faith in last year and you invested a lot in as a defender, and you don't want to lose that. So I think we could see maybe a 4-back or a 5-back switch for Petrucelli, going back to that consistent 4-back, wing backs in the midfield, perhaps along with the 3 center backs. But I think the midfield unit with just 5 players listed there, and really 0 experience between any of them playing with Chicago, right? Of course, you've got a Julia Bianchi who's going to come in and dominate, right? She's going to play defensively, lights out in that position. I think Chicago getting a player like Addie McCain is also interesting. I'm not exactly sure where we could see her play. And I think Carrie Riccaro is a great get. And then, of course, you've got Jill Aguilera and Sam Fisher, who were with this roster last year, but did not see a lot of time. I think that for Chicago, the biggest change this year is going to be the midfield. How are they going to come together? How are they going to play? We know that Mallory Swanson's going to score all the goals up top. Alyssa Nair is going to get a lot of shutouts in between the net. But how easy is it for the lines to connect for Chicago when they have such an inexperienced and new midfield? And that's going to be something that's really interesting to talk about.
It's almost like when we're looking at the possibility of like, who's the young prospect that we want to see come in here and make an immediate impact for this Red Stars team? It's not just this current draft class that you can really pull from. There are a handful of players who are going to enter just their sophomore year with the Red Stars. So it's like you really can pull from kind of 2 handfuls of players here when you're looking at the idea or the concept of a young prospect that needs to come in and really try to have a little bit of a breakout season. When you're looking at some of these players, who are you looking for to maybe kind of get in there and make a name for themselves in 2023?
In terms of some of the young players on this roster, I think we have to look at the sophomores to start, in a sense. Someone like an Ava Cook that came in last year for this team and really got a lot of consistent minutes up top. I think Ella Stevens is also on that level. How can those 2 players develop their game this year and really step it up? Take what they did last year and double it. And that's a really hard and tall ask to put on 2 young players like that, but they're playing alongside the best player in the world right now in Mallory Swanson. How can they continue to build on that and combine with a Swanson? Because Swanson's going to get assists as well. That's something that she's been known to do. She did it really well with Chicago last year. So can players like Cook and Stevens play off of a Swanson in order to get those goals and contribute up top? And then, of course, the draft pick, the forward out of Penn State University, Penelope Hawking, 7th overall for Chicago. This is a player that everyone's got to have your eyes on. This is the best draft pick that Chicago picked up this year. How can she step right into this game? She played 5 years at Penn State, so 5 years in college and coming out of Penn State. This is a player that I think is going to be ready to go right from the start. And I want to see kind of how she slots into that front line. I mean, and I also think like during the preseason, a player like Hawking is learning from someone like a Mallory Swanson and shooting on someone like Alyssa Nair. So you're automatically being forced to be better than you were a day ago at this point. And I think that's only going to help someone like Hawking.
No, I'm with you 100%. I think Hawking, the way the draft ended up rolling out, I think it just sort of shows how highly rated Hawking was in terms of the forward or attacking type of prospects going into this draft. I think the Red Stars were a little bit surprised that she fell to them at number 7, considering like all of the flurry of movement that took place on draft days. So scored a lot of goals during her time with USC, had a really big impact for Penn State. And now she's going to be with the Red Stars and hopefully can make that impact. I think maybe she can benefit, like you're talking about, getting these reps in preseason, talking about Alyssa Nair shooting against her, or getting these reps in alongside someone like a Pugh, but maybe playing alongside somebody like a Yuki Nagasato. Someone who has had a lot of experience now at this point playing in NWSL, but really across the globe. And we've heard a lot out of the Chicago Red Star side from players in regards to Nagasato specifically and what it has meant to them and their development playing alongside a player of her caliber. So I'm eager to see some of these young players kind of maybe take a little bit of skills, and sort of mentality from Nagasato, and sort of kind of put all that together on the pitch. Nagasato is someone that they are going to have with them during the World Cup stretch. While she may have represented Japan in the past as a World Cup champion and an Olympic medalist, Nagasato's time with the national team came to an end years ago. And she will be with this team during long stretches of the World Cup. And that's why I think she's going to be one of those players that younger players are maybe going to try to latch onto a little bit for good reason. Because Mal Swanson is going to be a player who's probably going to the World Cup based on her form.
Yep.
Alyssa Nair, the number 1 goalkeeper for the U.S. women's national team, likely going to be absent in World Cup stretches as well. And we're high on Tierna Davidson. We believe she's going to get back into the mix, get back into an international window with the national team, and utilize club play to get herself back to fitness, and will likely be absent in the World Cup stretch as well. So that's 3 pretty big players that this team is going to be without. I think it's important that we highlighted a little bit of what we could see in that back line in light of losing big defensive pieces in somebody like a Nair or a Davidson.
Yeah, I think it's massive to talk about because right now on the Chicago's roster, they've only got 2 goalkeepers rostered, Alyssa Nair and Emily Boyd. And Alyssa Nair is going to the World Cup. You can't just have 1 goalkeeper. So there's going to be some national team replacement players signed, perhaps. Looking at a little bit of depth there, I think defensively, Chicago is really going to struggle during the World Cup, during what is played by those Challenge Cup, because the NWSL regular season takes a bit of a pause from July 9th through August 18th. The World Cup July 20th through August 20th. So it will be the Challenge Cup during that time. But I think that, honestly, this year, when I'm looking at Chicago overall, their team is going to be Mallory Swanson and then like some defensive pieces that they have. But like I could imagine Chicago's score lines this year just racking up on both ends because Swanson's going to score goals at the rate she's going right now, at the clip she's scoring goals and developing, and even her XGs, her shot percentage to goal percentage is fantastic. She's going to be their entire team. And how do you it's really a tall task for Chris Petrucelli from preseason up until July, when you start to lose a player like Swanson for the World Cup. How do you develop the players around Swanson so they can contribute and keep scoring, keep getting into the attacking end without her while she's gone? And the team, it'll drop off. There will be a drop off, but make sure it's not as giant as a drop off as it would be when you lose a player like Swanson. And then, defensively, a Tierna Davidson and Alyssa Nair, those are big holes in the back line, especially if Petrucelli's only playing with 3 in the back.
We'll see. I think this leads us to our burning question for Chicago Red Stars in terms of their, what could lead up to their projected finish. I think there's a lot of question marks around this team in terms of positional areas on the pitch. I think most significant is the midfield. For nearly a decade, this franchise had claim to one of the top midfielders in the league. You could look to Chicago Red Stars and say, this is the top 4 midfield unit that exists within the league. And now going into 2022, a lot of players who once were staples of that middle third are no longer options for this team. So they went out and made an acquisition. They made a signing, and there's some hope there that they will try to return to respectable performances in this middle third on the pitch. And does it all lie with the midfield? Does Chicago's season live and or die with the midfield performance? Can the midfield gel and lead Chicago back to the playoffs? We know what Mallory Swanson can do and provide for this team. She is having a ridiculous start to her 2023. That's not a burning question for anybody. We know Mal Swanson and what she can provide for this team. Do they have a good goalkeeper in Alyssa Nair? Yes, that's not a question mark there. We're talking about the defense and how maybe there might be some champion problems there, that there's almost too many good options to integrate back in this back line. So that's why our burning question lies with the midfield. Can this midfield, can this middle third gel and become a cohesive unit and really be the X factor that leads Chicago back to the playoffs?
It's really the biggest 180 from last year. Chicago's midfield was the most consistent, as you mentioned, for a decade in this league. And now it is the most inconsistent of any of the 12 teams in this league. And so often games are won or lost in the midfield. The only reason I think that Chicago might break that rule this year is because they've got Nair between the sticks and Swanson up top. That is the only reason that this team might get away with having a disjointed midfield. The only reason. And I think if they can get their midfield together somehow, it'll be a very different season for Chicago. But I think the burning question of this midfield and what they're going to do and how they can gel this year really kind of goes hand in hand with our projected finish for Chicago in 2023. Because honestly, without Swanson on this team, even Swanson 2 months ago, before we're seeing her form in 2023, I would have said this is a bottom 4 team in Chicago. Now that they've got Swanson and she is scoring at this clip, it does. I mean, I hate to say that so much. I hate to say that so much weight of a team's fate lays on one player's shoulders, but you cannot look past a player like Swanson. I think that Chicago is a team that's going to be on the playoff bubble this year. That it's a little bit of a rebuild year. I think their midfield is going to be very telling after the first month or so of regular season play against really good competition against other top midfields in the league, how they will fare this year. But if they make the playoffs, I'm not going to be super surprised just with the top talent that they've had bookending the field in goal and up top as your striker. But this is a team that if they're on that 6-7 team bubble, that's where I think we're going to see them.
Okay. So you're giving them like a range. You're giving them a bubble range, but mostly in that bottom half of the table.
Yes.
All right. I don't know if I disagree with you 100%, but the only, again, similar to Angel City when we did a preview for them earlier, that's the silver lining in this. Mm-hmm. While we're talking about extremely impactful players for the Chicago Red Stars during a long stretch of international windows or World Cup stretches of time, there are 12 teams in this league who are all going to be affected by the same thing. And that includes the Red Stars. And it's why I feel like you can make a case for them to miss out or be a bubble team, but I also think it's the reason why you can make a case for them to sneak in. So while you have them maybe like a low 4, I have them a little bit of a higher 4. I'm going to go 5 to 9, somewhere between that. So it could either be real happy or real disappointing. But we'll see. We'll have to see. We both agree, though, it all depends on that midfield and how they gel together.
Yeah. Completely. It does. It comes down to the midfield and how this team will do. It'll be interesting to watch this Chicago team this year. It really will.
All right, this is just the beginning of our 12-team, team-by-team previews for NWSL ahead of the 2023 regular season. That's all we've got for you today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us on Attacking Third. Make sure you download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. You can watch us, too. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube to get alerts for whenever we go live, youtube.com/Attacking Third. We'll be back with more team-by-team previews for the 2023 season. It kicks off March 25th on Paramount Plus. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.